Welcome back to rheumatoidsolutions.com, where we interview people who've had tremendous success with their lifestyle interventions with their inflammatory arthritis. And we discuss ways in which you too might be able to improve your approach and work with your doctor, with others inside our support group, with your family, and how you can transform your body to get better health and less symptoms. Today's guest is Brenda. She's in Memphis, Tennessee, and she's going to talk about how she has made tremendous improvements by going cold turkey off of the previous way she used to eat, and now being in a position of vastly improved state with her inflammatory arthritis. And so, Brenda, welcome to this episode.
All right, great. Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be able to share, and we've been having a laugh about Memphis and people when they're coming to visit your city to celebrate Elvis's birthday and so on. But we're going to talk about your health today.
Okay.
And can you tell us what was sort of the before state where you had symptoms, and how are your symptoms right now?
Before state, I was really tired all the time. I had pain in my finger joints, my wrist, my ankles, my knees, and oftentimes somewhat my back. But just the overarching heaviness and the pain of my joints, sometimes it was just difficult to get through a day. I can remember times, I started doing yoga because of it. And I can remember times where I just had to crawl to the television just to put the yoga DVD in, just to try to get some kind of relief. I mean, I literally couldn't get up to walk. That's just how excruciating the pain was. And however, before the Patterson plan, I was eating everything. I was a coffeeholic. I loved coffee. When I started drinking coffee, I mean, it was so, it was so thin you could see through it. And over the years, it just looked like motor oil. I mean, I could just drink it like, and then of course, sugar, and then lots of dairy, and had no idea. I mean, I just didn't have any idea what those type of foods was contributing to my pain. And so I went to see my back doctor, actually, and he took blood work, and he's like, your inflammation factor is pretty high. I want you to see, another doctor. I had no clue. And I went to see a rheumatologist, and he said, yeah, you have rheumatoid arthritis. And I think the hardest part for me at that point was, number one, accepting that I had it. That was like major. And it seemed like it just spiraled me even deeper into a depression, because I'm like, oh my God, what is this? How do I treat it? What do I need to do? And it just made me even all the more painful. I just went into a depression. My joints seemed to hurt even worse. And then my brother actually stumbled across your website, and he sent me an email, and he's like, hey, I think this guy might be able to help you. And that's how I found the Patterson plan. And so I clicked on it. I signed up for the program. And when I read about the coffee, I went cold turkey on coffee. I mean, the way you explain it, as far as, just what coffee actually does to you. And I thought, oh my God, I've been drinking coffee for, 20 years. Not to mention I was a Splendaholic. So I'm just pouring Splenda and cream. It was just so destructive. So once I read your book, and I was like, you know what, that's it. I cut everything out. Now, prior to that, the doctor put me on hydroxychloroquine, right? Well, first he started with leufonamide.
Can you just tell us how you are now compared to all that?
Now it is, now, I mean, I took my last dose of rheumatoid arthritis medicine. I was on Humira September the 9th. and I had to have a bone biopsy because we thought, what's wrong with my white blood cell count was decreasing, my red blood cell count, I was anemic, all of that. And we thought it was coming from the medication. So that was the last dose. I went to see got the bone density. And after that, the roomie said, you're doing fine. Your levels are low. You don't have any joint pain. I didn't have any swelling. And he's like, overall, how are you feeling? I said, I feel great. I really feel much better without the drugs. And so he said, well, whatever you're doing is working. So I don't need to see you for 6 months. So I don't see him until sometime in June. I mean, I literally, today, I have no pain, none. I just don't have any pain.
Yeah.
And I thought I would never see this day. I literally thought, oh my God, will I ever just feel even better where, my pain is tolerable? So today is just fantastic. It's amazing. I never thought I would feel this good.
The magic of the right food, the right approach, the feeling of support, because you're inside our support group and we are there for you.
Yes.
If you ask questions, and you can find resources. One very important resource that we're going to talk about as we go through your journey here, a video from one of our doctors that was on one of the live calls, which was transformative for you to watch that. And we'll talk about that when it comes to white cell count in a minute. So firstly, well done, Brenda. I mean, what an extraordinary place to be in. As you said, it's now, it's the biologic drug is well out of your system. So you're not having any long tail effects from the drug. You've got no symptoms. You have rheumatoid arthritis. You previously had it in fingers, wrists, knees, and more. I mean, it just goes to show what is possible. And of course, everyone's different. We all come into this with different sort of starting points, but that is extraordinary. So in this discussion, why don't we talk about some of the challenges that you faced before you've gotten to where you are now? You explained before we hit record that you went through Plaquenil, methotrexate, then Humira. I want to hear about your experience going through that journey, starting with the Plaquenil or hydroxychloroquine, and then what the decision points were to change medications, because a lot has happened in maybe a year and a half there with the drugs.
Well, and I did mention like I was about to mention the leufonamide. I started with leufonamide. Right. And the very first medication the doctor put me on was leufonamide, and I was supposed to take them twice a day. So the first dose that I took was, I thought, I better take this on a Saturday just to kind of see, I didn't want to be at work with it, didn't know how it was going to affect me. And literally, I ended up in the ER. I started having heart palpitations, I had pressured speech, I was shaking. And so ended up in the emergency room and just had a really bad reaction. And from that, we went to the hydroxychloroquine or Plaquenil. And I was just ecstatic about that because as soon as I took it, I felt so much better.
Did you have to do a cleanse to get off the leflunomide? Was there a cleanse that you had to do to clear your body from after taking the drug?
No, they just told me I would have to. Well, they had me on an IV, so I guess they kind of flushed, if you will, while I was in the ER. But other than that, no, they said we're just going to have to let the rest of it take its course, and that was it. And I came home. The next morning, I pulled up actually Dr. McDougall's website, and I went through my kitchen. I threw out the sugar. I threw out everything, and I just stopped right then. And then I got on your plan, and like I said, I quit the cold coffee, cold turkey. I quit the meat. I quit the dairy. I ran out, got the cucumbers and the celery, which is golden. Oh my God. That is, I think, the highlight of every day is the celery and cucumber juice. That is amazing. That I just, yeah, I can't say that enough. That's amazing. And so then we went from the hydroxychloroquine because my labs at first, so he thought we're normal, but I couldn't take the leufonamide. I went to the hydroxychloroquine. I quit eating meat. I quit eating all of the junk. And then my labs start to go the other way. My white blood cells started to decrease. My red blood cell was decreasing. I was anemic, these type of things. And so at that point, he wanted to take me completely off of the Plaquenil because we thought that's what was causing it, because those drugs do cause those things. And so we went from that to the methotrexate. Well, mind you, I'm still eating whole food plant-based now. So I'm going to, methotrexate. I get there and that just makes me feel, oh my God, 10 times worse. The fatigue was almost unbearable. And I just remember, how am I going to get through this, So I told him, it's like, he said, so let's try the Humira. So then we went to the Humira. Mind you, my white blood cell count is still on the decrease and everything. So then I get the bone density to see if there's any other blood cancers that might be, pulling, my cell count down. And because when I went to get that done, he said, I'm going to take you off everything until we get those results back. So he did. So no Humira. That was my last dose was September the 9th, and got the bone density done. I was feeling better. Everything. I just was like, oh my God, I hope he doesn't put me back on another drug, because I'm feeling so much better. And so I go back and he says, well, your lab work looks really good. But I had kind of started eating like some turkey here and there. And so I remember Dr. Clapper and, your interview, and I thought, yeah, that's that. It's not that my blood work is, better. Or worse. It's actually getting better because I don't have all those toxins from, eating meat and all that other garbage.
Let me stop you there, because this is where it gets a little bit what. So what we'll do now is I'm going to insert the piece of information that we had on the live call with Dr. Michael Clapper. Okay. And you and I will continue our conversation. But let's just insert this so that we can share with our audience here, and they can keep up with our train of thought here.
Okay.
Okay, so let's talk about, if you don't mind, let's talk about blood tests first of all. One question just to kick us off that I am not able to answer terribly well is how does the white cell count play as a sort of indicator of health, and what's going on? Talk about white cell counts and so forth, please.
Indeed. Well, in the blood is this amazing red liquid that flows through our body. There's three main kinds of cells: red blood cells, the round things carry oxygen. Little platelets clot our blood. They seal leaks in the blood vessels when they occur. And the third type of cells are the white blood cells, the leukocytes. And they, in turn, come in several different flavors. And so when the white blood cell count is up, there might be several different reasons why, and they will all raise the total white count. The white blood cells known as neutrophils are usually directed against bacterial infections. If you had a skin abscess or a dental infection, you might find your neutrophil count would go up. Let me turn it the other way around. Your total white count, which is normally should be 5,000, although vegetarians, it drifts down to 2,500, 3,000, absolutely normal. 5,000, 7,000, those are normal white blood cell counts. But if you have a bacterial infection, your total white count may go up to 12,000, and among that, only about 50% should be neutrophils. You'd find 80, 90% would be neutrophils of your white count of 17,000. Clearly, there's a bacterial infection. Appendicitis, things like that will cause that. But that's not what happens in rheumatoid arthritis. There's a different type of cell. These are usually called, these are lymphocytes. And they can go up in response to viral infections. They have a cousin type of white cell called monocytes. And the lymphocytes and monocytes, they can go up in response to immune reactions and viral infections, which gets us more towards what rheumatoid arthritis is. And occasionally during an acute phase, when someone first comes down with a rip-roaring hot case of rheumatoid arthritis, they get a rise, an elevation of their white blood cell count can go up to 8, 10, 12,000, and most of them are lymphocytes or monocytes, so a sign that the immune system is very upset about something. And those are the common types of white cell elevations that we see. But again, that's usually with the acute inflamed episodes. But as we all know, the rheumatoid arthritis can be this low-grade, chronic, percolating discomfort in the background. And by the time the condition settles into that phase, the white blood cells have kind of made a little bit of peace with it, and their numbers settle back down to the, quote, normal range of 4,005, 6,000. And so the folks with the chronic, long-standing rheumatoid arthritis commonly have normal white blood cell counts. So in the case of this particular condition, it implies an acute flare-up, but it's not a good index as far as the chronic severity, how severe the disease really is, whether it's causing much damage. You're not going to see that reflected in the white blood cell count per se.
Okay. What about if we just take a case of low white blood cell count? What might that be?
Right. This is a fascinating subject because it came to my attention, 25 years ago when I first started caring for people who were on purely plant-based diets. I was taking care of a lot of vegan patients. And once or twice a year, I still get a call from a patient or a doctor, a family doctor, about this patient who's got impending bone marrow failure because their white blood cell count has fallen down to 2,000. Clearly, there's something terrible happening in the bone marrow. And I initially got alarmed, but in recent years, it's become very clear there's nothing wrong with these people at all. And there's a number of lessons that I think are very instructive. And there's twofold lessons, one having to do with the actual cause of the white blood cell count elevation, as well as how we interpret it as normal. So, as far as what's really going on, what I think is this: what is happening is this. It's important for people to understand that when they look at their blood test results and they get their complete blood count, their CBC back, and they look over in the right-hand column, they're going to see the head of the counts is range of normal values, and there's two numbers connected by a dash, the lower limit and the upper limit of normal. And we accept this. Okay, that's normal. But it's very important for your listeners to understand that the population of folks from which those blood tubes are drawn are standard Western American folks who are eating the standard Western diet, and that includes eating a piece of meat, basically with every meal, 3 times a day. They'll have bacon and eggs for breakfast, or a cheeseburger for lunch, or chicken for dinner, and 3 times a day, animal muscle is disappearing down their throat. Well, if you drill down in that, you understand that this meat, all meat, comes from the slaughterhouse, obviously, even organic meat. And because the animals, whether they're cows or pigs or chickens or veal calves, whatever they are eviscerated, their intestinal tracts are removed, are taken out. And in the doing of that act, the intestinal bacteria slop all over the cutting surfaces of the slaughterhouse. And all slaughterhouse surfaces have a thin film of bacteria from the animal's intestines. And these bacteria inevitably coat every piece of meat that comes out of the slaughterhouse. You can culture these intestinal bacteria off the surface of the chicken breast or the steak. Why am I bother saying this? Because when these white let me try it again. When these bacteria from the in animals' intestines, when they die, when they break apart, their cell walls, the outer boundary of the cells, as that structure breaks apart, it produces molecules called endotoxin. Ooh, this is nasty stuff. Endotoxin will injure your gut wall. It makes the gut leaky. It sets off inflammatory reactions, and it raises your white blood cell count.
Uh-huh.
Well, it turns out also that endotoxin molecules are heat stable. So cooking the burger does not destroy the endotoxin. So 3 times a day, our omnivorous friends, colleagues, and patients are eating endotoxin and giving their bone marrow a little shot of this molecule that sets off a molecular alarm that tells the bone marrow there's infection loose in the bloodstream, send out your white blood cells. And the bone marrow obliges. And as a result, people eating the standard meat-based diet are giving themselves little jolts of endotoxin 3 times a day. And as a result, their white blood cell count is elevated chronically. And this is taken as normal. But realize when you see the term range of normal values, that is normal in the mathematical sense. The norm, ask any mathematician, the norm is the midpoint of a span of numbers. It has nothing to do with health. It's just the midpoint of a span of numbers. And yes, that is the range of normals. And that value is normal, but does not equal healthy. And we have to realize that when people adopt a plant-based diet and they stop jolting their bone marrow with endotoxin 3 times a day, as the months and years go by, the white blood cell count starts drifting downward to 2,000, 2,500, and that's really normal. The immune system is not alarmed about anything. That's really what it's supposed to be. But the family doctors who are not aware of this phenomenon, they get all upset. They think the bone marrow is failing. No, actually, that's what a normal plant-eating human being should run as a peripheral white count. It's about 2,000, 2,500. That's all they need. So people eating your kind of diet, they should not concern if their white count dips below 3,000, as long as there's no infections or anything else happening in their body. So that's why that lowish white count is actually, it's a good thing. It's a sign of health as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. That was fantastic. All right. Okay, so now what Dr. Clapper is pointing mostly towards here is the white cell count, and that's what he was talking about there. Was it the white cell count that was worrying your rheumatologist the most that was dropping? Because that's the one where you normally get sent off to the hematologist and they want to run these, bone biopsies to find out if your bones are producing the white cells. Do you recall if it was that primarily that was worrying your rheumatologist? And how are those levels now of your white cells, your red cells, and platelets and so on?
Well, what was worrying him was the decline over time of all 3. The fact that my anemic and the white blood cell and the red blood cell. Because at first it was really just the red blood cell, and didn't show any signs of anemia, but I was almost borderline. And then the next quarter he would do blood work and then he would see a additional decrease in, say, the red blood cell. And then we got to the white blood cell. So by the time we start seeing the decrease in the white blood cell, he said the fact that all 3 of those over the period, looking at the trend, all 3 of them are consistently decreasing, I'm at an alarm. And so that is why we went to the hematologist. It wasn't per se just the one. It was all 3 of them over the time frame of would have been 6 months, I guess, the decline of all 3. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And I want to reassure people that rarely do we have the issue across the board of all 3 dietarily. Dr. Clapper, in his video that we just played, is talking about white cell count. And he has since told us, my family and I, because Melissa, after she had her COVID vaccine, her white cell count dropped because of the vaccine.
Mhm.
So my wife, Melissa, and I set up a telehealth appointment through plant-based telehealth with Dr. Clapper. And he actually gave us the same, explanation as the video that we shared. And so in that explanation, he said that it is uncommon. He said, but maybe once or twice a year, someone comes to him and says,
Mhm.
that their doctor is really worried about someone going to is coming to them, and the doctor's really worried because of the white cell count. And so that's the way he described it to us, and reassured Melissa that her white cell count would slowly restore after the vaccine response was slowly sort of being eliminated
Mhm.
from her body. And sure enough, last two blood tests, she only had one the other day, and then she had one a few weeks ago. We're watching it fairly closely, and it's been 6 months now, right? They dropped
Mhm.
for a long time, but hers now back up into normal range again, just as he predicted. And
Mhm.
she hasn't gone off and eaten any other sort of different
Mhm.
foods. Her vaccine associated, timing of the white cells dropping uh, seems to have just been a slow sort of restoration from then.
Mhm.
But look, her recommendation from her local primary doctor was to go to the hematologist, get a biopsy
Mhm.
of the bone,
Mhm.
all this stuff, and
Mhm.
really, it's just as the explanation exists. So,
It is.
and
And
so
those tests are so expensive too. Um,
I
they're
imagine.
very expensive. I just, I was glad that, I could go, but that test was, it's expensive. And, you know, it's just one of those things where having, the knowledge to know that this is what's happening to my body versus, another medication or, all these added tests. Um, I mean, that's just golden for me. It was just
Yeah.
golden for me because I'd rather give my body the food and the nutrients it needs. It's doing what it's supposed to do. My levels are good now. Um, it was just golden for me.
It's worrying though, isn't it? And this is the doctor did the right thing in my view, just my humble opinion,
Mm-hmm.
is when things are looking, trending in the wrong direction, it's best to pull pharmaceuticals out of the picture and just try and normalize things,
Mm-hmm.
because nobody wants these plummeting blood results. And given that they're normal now, it does sound like there was a contribution from the medications you were taking. It wasn't just the white cell count. As I was going to say, that these other, the platelets, the anemia, the red cell count, all of this stuff, that's not normal to change with the plant-based diet. And as Dr. Clapper emphasizes, it's only occasionally, rarely does he also see, you know, a white cell count that's alarming a doctor, and the doctor then is very highly concerned. So anyway, well done, Clara, getting all that under control. It's very worrying when you're going through these things, and you and doctor, everyone's doing the right thing. Get tested, make changes.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want numbers going down off the cliff. That's dangerous and worrying. So well done for getting all the tests done. So, um, how were you feeling on the Humira? Did the Humira make you feel symptom free?
No. And the methotrexate made me feel bad in a different kind of way than the Humira, but the Humira also made me feel bad. Um, I would have shooting joint pains with the Humira. I mean, at random, it didn't matter whether it was, I mean, I tried to follow the trend of when I would, what I was feeling like every day. And so, he asked me, the doctor, he asked me, he's like, well, is it in the morning time that you get these, shooting pains? Is it in the evening, afternoon? Can you kind of, and it's at random, and it's in random places. It might be my finger, and then 15 minutes, it might be my knee, it might be my ankle, it might be my shoulder, but it was always in the joint. And it was just like this out of nowhere, this stabbing, sharp pain. And in addition to that, I just overall felt bad. And so, I just can't take it. I cannot take it. And at that time, we were scheduling with the hematologist anyway, and he really didn't want as much as possible to have any drugs in my system, just so we could get a good reading on what it was actually going on inside my bone marrow. So that is why we just discontinued the Humira. And when I went back, he's like, yeah, well, you don't have to go back on that. For one, it makes you feel too bad. Two, we don't want you having, sharp pains through your joints. But it was just, I could just tell it was, as the hematologist told me, she said, when we start messing with your immune system, it doesn't like it. And I said, you're telling me? And she said, yeah, so you're on these different drugs, and he's trying to find the one that works for you, but we're messing with your immune system. So we've got to get it just right. And she was really gracious and giving me lots of information. But that Humira, I just couldn't. It just made me feel bad in the worst kind of way. So the only drug that's really made me feel better was the Plaquenil. Now, even though I was feeling bad on the methotrexate and the Humira, doesn't mean that they were not have some benefit to them. I'm sure they were beneficial in some way, but my overall feeling and my joint pain and my swelling, I mean, it was still very, very prevalent.
Okay. Let's talk about what works for you. Tell us your routine that works best, and tell us what you think is the highest, well, in order of priority. Let's say you want to build someone who's in a bad way, and you're going to tell them, this is what you should do. You mentioned the juices with emphasis earlier. And walk us through. You've got to do the juicing. Is it some exercise? Do you have a daily routine with stress reduction? What's your diet look like, and which foods do you find are most healthy and helpful for pain reduction? I want you to share this with our audience.
Well, after reading your book, and I keep it handy to refer to, the one thing that I had to first do is get my mind right. So your quote of, and I'm probably I'm going to mess this up verbatim, but as far as the pain of the regret, discipline versus regret, once I read that, every morning when I wake up, that's the first thing I think about. The pain of discipline versus the pain of regret. You have a choice. And I just started telling myself that every day. That's what I would start with versus how was I thinking? What am I thinking about? What are my thoughts? And so from there, I would go straight to the kitchen and juice up some cucumber and celery juice. And actually, we have a yoga class that comes on our public broadcasting station early mornings. And I'll start my day that way. And that's what, because I don't really wake up with joint pain. I never really woke up with joint pain. And that's always something that my doctor would ask me, in the mornings when you get up, are you stiff? Do you have joint pain? No, my joint pain started after I got up and started moving, which was, I guess, not what most people experience. But I never woke up with joint pain. It was once I got moving, then my knees started hurting, then my fingers and all of that. So I start with my cucumber, celery, yoga. The foods I eat are sweet potatoes, are my best friend. Sweet potatoes, and I just leafy greens. Kale is one of my favorites. and I eat vegetable soup every day. Every day I have soup. And so I bought a Vitamix, I got the Instapots, and, I watch Chef AJ's videos, and, I make my soup every day, or, it'll last a few days. I bought some miso from, Melissa's on the Patterson plan, and I got the 2 different kinds, and I put that in there every day. And I eat soup every day. And I eat lots of leafy greens and salads.
Yeah. Can you tell us what you put into your soup?
Mostly leafy greens, but I have like 2 different types of kale in there. The regular curly leaf and the Jacinto kale. And I put spinach in there. And then I have like green beans. I try to stay on the green side. Everything that's green, cabbage, the greens, I just throw in the pot. Sometimes I put a little bit of corn just to give a little bit of sweetness. One of the other major things that I did stop doing, I think that was a major asset, was when I heard you say about salt. I try to follow the salt-free, oil-free, sugar-free, dairy-free, all that anyway. But the type of salt, I quit buying regular salt, and I use the Celtic salt. So I put a pinch of that in there. And I try to stay away from the tomatoes. And that's what I make. And I just vegetables, green beans, lima beans, mostly cabbage and leafy greens, collard greens sometimes, greens.
So your soup isn't a vegetable soup like having like hearty root veggies with potatoes and pumpkins and carrots and onions and so on. No.
Not much. No, I do put onions in there, but I don't really. Tomatoes don't bother, or potatoes don't bother me. I never really have I know they're a nightshade, but I've never had a problem with potatoes. But I just want those greens, and that's a good way for me to get them in. Potatoes will kind of make me, full, and I don't want to be too full that I don't get those greens in. So it's mostly the leafy greens, green beans, a little bit of corn, lima beans, a few peas, but mostly cabbage, spinach, and kale. Yeah.
You mentioned coffee before, and in the process of writing my book, I've spent far too long looking at scientific publications and researching. But one that I wanted to bring to your attention and our audience's attention is a study that was done in year 2000. And this study, which is called Coffee Consumption, Rheumatoid Factor, and the Risk of Rheumatoid Arthritis, it was an epidemiological study, which means it's done over like a retrospective look at data that already exists. It doesn't require people to do anything. You're working off population data. And a survey of actually 6,809 people showed that there was a positive correlation between the risk of developing rheumatoid arthritis and coffee consumption. So it is a risk factor in the same way that we know that smoking is a risk factor. I don't have the data as to know which one is greater, but I would imagine smoking is greater. But still, that's just my guess. But we know that coffee consumption is a risk factor. And so sometimes people will say, well, what about decaf coffee? Well, let me read from my book here. Decaffeinated coffee is also associated with rheumatoid arthritis development. A study showed women who drank 4 or more cups of decaffeinated coffee on a daily basis doubled their risk of developing rheumatoid arthritis compared to those who drink no coffee at all. And that is from a 2002 study called Coffee, Tea, and Caffeine Consumption and Risk of Rheumatoid Arthritis, results from the Iowa Women's Health Study. So, it can be tempting because there are some popular plant-based social media people at the moment who are drinking coffee, and they are on Instagram and other platforms saying, look, the data on coffee's, fairly good, and I feel fine drinking coffee. Well, I disagree. If you don't, like, if there's a risk factor for developing rheumatoid arthritis based on coffee consumption, why? Why would you add to the risk? If you don't have rheumatoid arthritis, go and play your own game. But we've got studies associated with our condition, and I care in my family. Do I need to look after people with inflammatory arthritis? And so there's a couple of studies there that are very important. Did you notice that when you stopped the coffee, that you immediately felt better after the couple of days of caffeine withdrawal passed?
Yes. I think for 3 reasons. 1, just to stop it. 2, to add the celery and cucumber juice. And 3, to be drinking more water, because your joints need that water. And so I was just chugging water. I mean, literally, seriously, I was still crawling on the floor during those days. So anything I could do for some relief. So I would just chug water, chug water. I quit the coffee and I would chug the celery and cucumber. And I would say around day 3, I could vastly tell the difference. But now, mind you, I was drinking a good pot of coffee a day, a big pot, and it looked like motor oil. So it was really, really strong. It was full of Splenda. It was full of dairy. It was full of cream. So it took a little while, but my body is so super sensitive to drugs and food, which is kind of a, it's a curse, I think, and a blessing in a sense, because my body responds quickly. So it's either going to respond bad or it's going to respond good, and it's going to do it quickly. And so about the 3rd day, I was like, oh my God, my joints just felt like they exhaled. But another one of your videos with another person in the community, she talked about her consumption of honey. And I went from sugar to honey, and I actually could not understand why I was still kind of joint pain, crawling on the floor. And so I typed in the chat for, I sent the message about, the honey. And sure enough, I got a response from your assistant, and she said, just back off the honey for a couple of days and see how you do. And thanks to that video with that young lady that's in our community, I learned about honey. So I have not had honey and in the vast amounts since then. But I had no idea to even consider food sensitivities at that point. And I just thought honey was going to be okay. I'm getting rid of the sugar, but my body does not like large amounts of honey. And I would not have known that had I not, watched that video with the other young lady that's in our community. So the food, I've learned to really pay attention as it relates to food sensitivities along the way. So that's another thing that's part of my routine. When you're asking about my routine every day, if I try something new, I'm monitoring and logging basically how I feel afterwards, because my body responds so quickly. It doesn't take long for me. I'm either going to have a flare pretty soon, pretty quickly, or it's going to be okay. And that's just learning how my body reacts, and the timing made a lot of difference for me.
What do you do now if you do notice that something hasn't worked for you when you've reintroduced it and there is something responding in your joints? What is your get out of jail quick strategy?
I go straight back to the basic Patterson plan. Literally, that's because that works. And you talk about that in the book as well. And so I go straight back to the baseline, and I just even chug more water. And it doesn't, like I said, because my body responds really quickly to something, it doesn't take long for those symptoms to subside. But I have to go back to the baseline. And that's what I do now. I think, if I'm not mistaken, by the time you introduce the sweet potato soup, which has become one of my favorites, um, I love sweet potatoes. Always have. I can just eat them plain. I can eat them cold. I can eat them raw. I just love sweet potatoes. So when I change up my soup, I'll make a pot of the sweet potato soup as well as the other soup, just so I can have, the go-to. And I noticed that my gut likes how it feels when it gets sweet potatoes. Um, when I take my pre and probiotics, I can tell how my gut feels. So again, back to the baseline, knowing what feels good in my gut, because my gut will tell me, hey, I didn't like that. You're going to have a flare for eating that. I feel it in my gut before I ever feel it in my joints.
Mm.
I really do.
God bless the sweet potato. There are communities in very primitive areas who still mostly just live on sweet potatoes. There are islands, in the Pacific, some of which I've visited, where most of their diet is just a vast majority of sweet potatoes, and often different, just types of varieties of sweet potatoes. So these root vegetables can be extraordinarily sustaining. And Dr. McDougall talks about the white potato and how you can almost live off a white potato. And
yes, he does.
A guy in Australia who actually proved that by eating nothing but potatoes for a year. So, we don't need to look too far to find healthy foods. They're simple and affordable and humble. So where does that leave you now? What are your plans now, Brenda? And what is your next goal? And what are you working towards here, and the areas that you want to improve upon further?
Well, I mainly want to stay off the drugs. I mean, I just want to not ever go back on them anymore. I have a standing order of prednisone, but I don't take it. And my roomie asked me, are you taking the prednisone? And I'll say no. And he'll say, well, why? And I said, well, for one, my pain is not such that I need to take it, and I don't want to get hooked on it. So if I don't need it, I appreciate that I have it. But again, the pain of discipline far outweighs the pain of regret. So I just don't want to go there, because I've been on both sides. I've been on that regret side, and I don't want to go back. So for me going forward, it's to continue, maybe testing other foods that I might be able to eat. Like, I can remember where I just could not eat tomato, not even a slice of tomato. Well, now I can, but I also know I can't just go overboard with tomatoes, or I know I'm going to have a flare. So just wanting to maintain, where I'm at, as far as no medication, going forward.
How are you with regards to fruits? Because when you said you had a issue with honey, the natural interpretation of that reaction is that it's simple sugars, because the honey is not bundled with fiber in a carbohydrate form, for example. So how are you, however, with fruits, where you do have that natural bond between the sugars and the cellulose, which means the body normally finds those foods okay, even if simple sugars are a trigger?
For me, the only fruit that if I eat it in a large consumption that will give me an issue was pineapple. I can eat papaya till it comes out of my ears. I can eat mandarin oranges. I can eat just about any fruit. I love papaya. Oh my God, I love papaya. So when it's in season, I'll get it and I put it on my salad. I'll eat it by itself. It is just the best. But I noticed I was making like a fruit smoothie in the mornings. I was like, okay, I'm feeling that feeling again, like I do when I consume the honey. What is it? And it was the pineapple. So I can have pineapple. I just have to really be, conservative with it. But any other fruit, I have no problem with fruit. Any other fruits.
That's just there's so many different types of fruits, all of which have so many health benefits. And it's easy, therefore, to also get our large diversity of different types of fiber into our diet, because you can literally just have a blueberry, a strawberry, a blackberry, and each of the fibers are slightly different, aiding to diversify the microbiome. And so it's really, really great that you're able to expand out into the fruit world, and pineapple neither here or there. So this is fantastic. And I think maybe my last question for you is, not to stereotype, but Memphis isn't known for its plant-based, restaurants and plant-based mentality. How are you fitting in with your community, your friends, your family, now that you've become plant-based? And is there some friction there with people with regards to eating with you? Or has there been some people who've been inspired by you and are thinking about change too?
I would say, believe it or not, more so the latter. We do have a community of vegans here. We have There's going to be 2 vegan festivals this summer. So we have a large vegan community. We have a restaurant called Raw Girls. I think they're sisters. They decided that they wanted to do like a restaurant with just good whole food and vegan. There's some vegan foods in there as well. And so they have 3 locations. So the community is getting there. I attended the vegan festival last year. I think it was in June or July downtown. It was fabulous. We had lots of vendors. So it's catching on. I was surprised, and I mean, it's definitely wanted, and it's here. So I'm thankful for that. As far as my family and friends, they're very supportive. My brother, who found your link and emailed it to me, he does not live here. He's been an avid follower of Dr. McDougall for 20 something years. So he lives in Illinois, and so he and I exchange recipes. Chef AJ, we're probably one of her biggest fans, and we trade her recipes. And so I have support with my family in that regard. My friends, some of them they're just very supportive, and they're trying themselves to kind of get on this wagon. So, I think the testimony of seeing, or the testament of seeing me go through, I think is inspiring to them, because they've seen me in agony. And I tell them, they just can't believe that I feel so much better. And I'm like, it's because of what I'm eating, y'all. There's nothing else to say about it. And we have a Whole Foods here. We have 2 locations, and it is amazing. We have a Trader Joe's as well. That is catching on. People are buying organic. People are buying more fruits and vegetables. We're in the South, so we do have a lot of areas, even towards the state of Mississippi, where there's farms. People are getting into growing whole food agriculture versus, making sure the soil is ready and not contaminated. So it's catching on. Yeah. So I have a lot of support. And even when I go shopping, I wanted to mention this too about my food. Cherries, I found my joints love cherries. And I know you had your experience with unwashed cherries before, but the darker cherries, when I can just eat them just like popcorn. I mean, I literally can just eat a bowl, and my joints love it when I eat cherries.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And because of that belief that I also had is why I was eating so many of them and stuffing myself with them. It wasn't the cherries, of course. It was the pesticides on them that gave me the food poisoning.
Yeah.
We recently, and this will be probably the final thing before we wrap up, my family and I went out to my sister's house in Orange here, which is about a 4-hour drive from our house. It's a little country town and it's got lots of cherry farms around it. And we went cherry picking. This is only a couple of months ago. And we loaded up on cherries and our kids love them just as much as I do and my wife. So, they're just a brilliant food. So if anyone's been a while since they've had a cherry, go out and grab some cherries. They are absolutely delicious.
Yeah.
So good for you. Well, Brenda, thank you so much. What a pleasure to chat with you today. Thank you for sharing. Congratulations on how far that you've come with your health. And I will also envision and picture the outcome that you are aiming for and work with you in our support group to make sure you have every possible chance of staying just as well as you are for the months and years ahead.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. And you have so many resources. I go there to find, answers to my questions. And I've just kind of navigated my way through those resources, and they've been so beneficial for me, as well as, just reading and watching the testaments of, other people in the community has been just beneficial. Yeah. So I appreciate you too, Clint.